The knock came on a gray October evening, and when Margaret Lyle opened her door she found a tall stranger standing hat in hand on her step, whole and well and unmistakably alive. And she knew him at once, though she had never in her life seen his face, because she had written to this dying man 47 times. But that is her side of it, and this is not her story to tell. Begin instead 5 months earlier, in a field hospital behind the lines at Verrières, where the Duke of Vanborough lay among the wounded and did not expect to see England again. His name in that place was not Vanborough. Tristan had gone to war under a plain name, Captain Lyle, of all the borrowed names in the world, taken from a dead cousin's papers, so that a duke might serve without a fuss being made of him. He had wanted to be nothing more than a soldier. He got his wish more completely than he intended. A French ball through the shoulder, a fever that followed, and long gray weeks on a cot in a canvas ward where men died in the night and were carried out before breakfast, and where the only medicine that seemed to do any good at all came in the form of letters. The letters were arranged by a society of ladies at home who wrote to soldiers with no families to write to them. Tristan, listed under his borrowed common name, had no family that knew where he was, and so he was given to a Miss Margaret Lyle of Havering, who by the accident of a shared surname had been matched to him as though she were a cousin. Her first letter reached him on the worst night of the fever. He could not read it himself. A chaplain read it to him. It was not what he expected. He had braced for pity, for the bright false cheer people used on the dying. Instead, the letter was funny. It told him in a wry clear hand about a goose that had established a reign of terror over the village green, about the vicar's disastrous sermon on the subject of patience, about the exact and ridiculous quality of the mud in a Havering spring. It asked him no questions he could not bear to answer. It simply talked to him, as a friend talks, as though he were a well man who happened to be far from home, and it ended, "I do not know what you are enduring, and I will not insult you by pretending to. I only know that someone should tell you the goose was rooted at last, and that you are thought of here, and that Havering keeps a place for you though it has never seen your face." Tristan wept at that, weak and shameless in the dark, and the chaplain pretended not to notice. He wrote back the moment he could hold a pen, and so it began 47 letters over 5 months, hers and his, crossing the channel through storm and siege. He told her things he had never told a living soul, that he was tired of being brave, that he was afraid, that he had held the hand of a boy of 19 while the boy died and had not been able to remember afterward whether he had said anything of comfort or only wept. He did not tell her he was a duke. He signed himself only Lyle, and let her think him what she plainly thought him, a poor soldier of no family, dying by inches in a foreign field. She never once flinched from any of it. She wrote back steadiness and wit and a fierce plain tenderness that asked for nothing. When he wrote that he thought he would not live to see another English spring, she did not weep at him or preach at him. She wrote, "Then let me be England for you until you are done. I will send you the spring in every letter, the primroses, the lambs, the smell of the first cut hay. If you must go, you will go with your pockets full of home. But I confess, Captain, I have grown selfish, and I would very much rather you lived, and came, and let me put a proper face to the man I have come to know better than half the people I have known all my life." He read that letter 40 times. He carried it in the breast of his coat until it wore soft at the folds. And somewhere in those 5 gray months, without ever seeing her face or hearing her voice, the Duke of Vanborough fell in love with the woman who was keeping a place for a dying stranger, and made a private, desperate, unsoldierly bargain with God, that if he were permitted to live, he would go to Havering and stand on her step, and tell her the whole truth of who and what he was, and take whatever came of it. He lived. The fever broke, the wound closed, the war for him ended, and a ship carried him home across a gray autumn sea. He wrote her no letter to warn her of his coming because he found he could not, because the truth he had to tell was not a thing for paper, and because he was, for all his rank and all his medals, badly afraid. And so he came to Havering on a gray October evening and knocked on the door of a small tidy house at the edge of the green, and a woman opened it and stood looking up at him. And he knew her, though he had never seen her, from the wry steady set of her mouth and the clear fearless attention in her eyes, which were exactly the eyes that had been reading to him across the sea for 5 months. Margaret Lyle went white, and then she went pink, and then she pressed one hand flat against the doorframe as though the ground had shifted. "You are alive," she whispered. "I'm alive." His voice would barely obey him. "You wrote that you would rather I lived and came. I have done both, but I have come under a false flag, Miss Lyle, and I cannot cross your threshold until it is hauled down." He turned his hat in his hands like a nervous boy. "The letters you had from Captain Lyle, every word in them was true save one, the name at the bottom. There is no Captain Lyle. It was a name I borrowed to serve quietly from a dead cousin so that no fuss would be made of me." He drew a breath and made himself hold her eyes. "Forgive me. I am the Duke of Vanborough. It was I who wrote to you. It was I you kept a place for, and I have deceived you for 5 months, and I would not blame you if you shut this door in my face." For a long, terrible moment she said nothing at all. Then Margaret Lyle did a thing he had not braced for. She laughed, not cruelly, not in shock, but with a kind of helpless, overflowing relief, one hand pressed to her mouth and her eyes bright with sudden tears. "A duke," she said. "I have been writing to a duke. I told a duke about the goose on the green. I lectured a duke on the vicar's sermon. I wrote to a duke that I had grown selfish and wanted him to live." She shook her head, and the laughter shivered into something nearer weeping. "And here I am in my second-best gown with flour on my apron, having given him no warning at all." "You gave me my life," Tristan said. "That is warning enough of anything." He did not step forward, he would not until she bid him. "Does it change it, the name?" Margaret took her hand from the doorframe. She looked at him, at the tall, well man on her step who had been, until this moment, a fading voice on paper, a soldier she had loved without a face. And she looked. He saw, not at the title he had confessed, but at the man beneath it, exactly as she had always looked at him. "You held a boy's hand while he died and could not remember whether you comforted him," she said quietly. "You wrote to me that you were tired of being brave. You wept, you told me, at the smell of imaginary hay. Is that man a duke?" "That man is every inch a duke," Tristan said. "That is the trouble with dukes, Miss Lyle. Everyone believes we are only the title. You are the one soul in England who wrote to the man inside it, who never knew there was a title and loved him anyway and kept a place for him." His voice went low. "I did not tell you the truth sooner because I was afraid. Not that you would love the Duke too little, that you would suddenly see the Duke and stop seeing me. I have been the Duke my whole life, and I have been the man for only 5 months and only to you. I could not bear to lose him again so soon." The tears spilled over then, and she did not dash them away. "You have not lost him," she said. "He is standing on my step in the rain. May the man come in. I will decide about the Duke later." He came in. She sat him at her own small fire and made him tea with hands that were not quite steady, and they talked haltingly at first, and then as they had always talked on paper, easily, wryly, truthfully, two friends who had known each other's souls for 5 months and were only now learning each other's faces. She showed him the drawer where she had kept his 47 letters, tied with a ribbon, worn soft at the folds exactly as her letter was worn soft in his coat. He drew hers out and laid it on the table beside its fellows, and they looked at the 2 bundles side by side, a whole correspondence of 2 people falling in love without a single glance exchanged. "I meant every word I wrote you," Tristan said, "including the ones I have not sent yet because I could not entrust them to paper." He reached across the small table and took her hand, and this time she let him, and her fingers were warm and ink-stained and entirely real. "I made a bargain with God on a cot at Verrières. I said that if I were let live, I would come to Havering and tell you the whole truth and ask you the question a dying man had no right to ask. I am no longer dying, Margaret, so I may ask it honestly." He held her eyes. "You kept a place for me when I had no face and no family and no name that was even my own. Will you keep it for the rest of your life? Not for the Duke, for the man who wept at the hay. He would very much like to come home to it." Margaret Lyle looked at the 2 bundles of letters, and at the tall living man who had walked out of them onto her step, and the last of her guarded steadiness melted into something bright and certain. "I kept a place for a dying stranger for 5 months, expecting to lose him," she said. "I am hardly going to give up the same man now that he has had the poor taste to survive and turn up on my doorstep with a title he might have mentioned." She laughed again, wetly, joyfully. "Yes, of course, yes. I have been half in love with your handwriting since April, Your Grace. It is a very great relief to find the rest of you lives up to it." He raised her ink-stained hand and pressed his lips to it, there by her small fire, with 47 letters bearing witness on the table between them. They were married at Havering in the spring, the true spring, the one he had thought never to see, with the primroses out along the lane and the lambs in the field and the smell of the first cut hay. All the things she had sent him on paper when he was dying, made real and gold and his at last. The society of ladies who had matched a lonely soldier to a lonely spinster took quiet credit for the whole affair, and were not entirely wrong too. The goose on the green survived to terrorize another generation. And the Duke of Vanborough kept two things by him all his long married life: a soft folded letter that had been read 40 times on a cot at Verrières, and the woman who had written it, who had kept a place for a stranger with no face and no name, and had, without ever meaning to, kept it for a duke.